Greetings from LA, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in very good spirits wherever you are in the world. And today, if you don't mind, I would very much like to continue on with our journeys, our discussions, our discoveries, and our explorations with respect to the recent releases made by the Criterion Collection during this year of 2024. And that brings us to a release of a title which actually already exists in the Criterion Collection at spy number 29. But this year, on the occasion of 2024, this year, the Criterion Collection has re-released this film, but this time employing the 4K UHD format in a 4K UHD plus Blu-ray combo format. And this is a film which is described as being from the year 1975. And the name of the filmmaker is Peter Weir. And the name of the work is Picnic at Hanging Rock. This is the haunting and hypnotic work, which is described as being from the year 1975, and the name of the director is Peter Weir, and this is a screenplay by Cliff Green based upon the novel by Joan Lindsay, and Russell Boyd is director of photography, and we have among its great cast people like Vivian Grey and Helen Morse and Anne Lambert, and also Rachel Roberts and others. This is the work which is Picnic at Hanging Rock. So Picnic at Hanging Rock is already, in fact, in the Criterion Collection, and it's been released by Criterion and indeed other labels. But in terms of the Criterion Collection physical media history, going all the way back to indeed the Laserdisc days and then into the early Criterion DVD days, which is what I have here. Again, at spine number 29. And then we had a what I consider to be one of the great physical media releases from Criterion of this work, Picnic at Hanging Rock. But this is a dual format edition, which at the time was a DVD and Blu-ray combo edition. But what was so great about this is we had not just the films and the disc, but also the actual book, Picnic at Hanging Rock by Joan Lindsay. Because again, this is a story which is based upon the novel by Joan Lindsay, and it's a really riveting and mysterious novel indeed. And now we also have, therefore, courtesy of Criterion, on the occasion of this year, 2024, Picnic at Hanging Rock, this time purported to be based on a new 4K digital restoration, and we'll talk a little bit about that later in this video, as well as, again, employing the 4K UHD format and the Blu-ray format. So we have two discs, the 4K UHD disc and the Blu-ray disc. Again, spine number 29, Picnic at Hanging Rock. So, gosh, there's so much to say about Picnic at Hanging Rock. I have spoken about this film a number of times already, in fact, on this YouTube channel, ever since I started this YouTube channel. This has always been one of my favorites in the collection. I have gravitated towards this film ever since I first saw it, and it's never let me go, or I've never let it go. There's something quite eerie and quite magical and quite captivating about it. It has a kind of dreamlike structure, but that dreamlike structure gives way, I think, quite almost imperceptibly at some points to this nightmarish scenario feeling. It really gets under the skin, as well as suggesting a type of fantasy, almost hazy, perfume-laced romance that is suggestive of something that's maybe on the tip of one's tongue, something that's there but not quite there, something that it's almost indescribable, that feeling, that sense, that yearning, that unknown, and indeed the dread and the fear and the idea of wanting to know but perhaps not quite being able to know. It's that nether world, that nether region of understanding and not understanding. It's at times, I think, very very almost hypnotic, but also quite frightening and even horrifying. So it's all here in this film, I think. Picnic at Hanging Rock. It is a film that is it just grabs you in a very almost romantic and as I say, perfume-like way. It has a alluring sense, and it also grabs you with the way it shocks and twists and turns as a kind of mystery that may or may not see a denouement resolution in a wonderful sort of turn of events that just builds and builds and builds, but also gives us room to ponder and wonder and interpret in our own way as to what might be happening before our very eyes as we are watching this unbelievable and quite startling work of art from director Peter Weir. This is the work which is Picnic at Hanging Rock. So if we were to try to describe this film, Picnic at Hanging Rock, the story, I mean, it's set at the start of the turn of the century, 20th century, at least according to the very opening explanatory card. And here we are in Australia, and we have a group of students at a girls' school, an all-girls school, and which is run by a very powerful and quite formidable presence in the form of Mrs. Appleyard, who's portrayed with such kind of force of nature-like quality by Rachel Roberts, the great Rachel Roberts. So she is the head of the school, right, Mrs. Appleyard. But one day there is a school excursion, St. Valentine's Day, and there's a school excursion, kind of outdoor field trip to Hanging Rock. And this involves most of the girls, the students at the school, being accompanied by a number of the teachers. And they go to Hanging Rock. And among the teachers that go there, Miss McCraw and Mademoiselle Deportier, who are portrayed by Vivian Gray and Helen Morse, respectively. And then among the pupils, among the students that go out to this outdoor field trip excursion, we have among them we have people like Marion and Irma, and in particular, in many ways, a kind of star pupil. One who seems to stand out from the crowd in an almost angelic way, and that is the character of Miranda. That's the Anne Lambert character. And so this trip to the Picnic at Hanging Rock title in question refers to this excursion, this day trip excursion by the students to Hanging Rock, which is this stone structure, natural or perhaps extraordinary stone structure. But when they go to the place, Hanging Rock, therein lies the mystery of this film. And let me stop here and say, a mystery occurs, something happens that is quite startling and quite sudden, and something that is unexplained. A very profound and deep and quite serious mystery occurs that has to do potentially, possibly, with the very lives of the students in question who are involved, in particular Miranda and others. And so it is up to the other characters that we meet along the way, including some of the teachers at the school, again played by Helen Morse and Rachel Roberts, for instance, and also some of the other characters that we meet in the area, such as Michael and Albert, and these are the characters portrayed by Dominic Guard and John Jarrett, respectively. And we find that there is a kind of hunt or pursuit to solve the mystery of Hanging Rock and what has happened to these girls, and how is this mystery going to be resolved and solved, if at all, and what is the extent to which the people, such as the Dominic Guard character, such as the Rachel Roberts character, John Jarrett, and others, what is the extent to which they are willing to go in order to try to find the solution to these mysteries? And what happens when danger seems to fall in their way as well. How will things resolve themselves? What will people do if the life and death stakes are indeed life and death stakes, and how will that affect the community writ large? And what will become of the people who are left behind as this mystery is lingering and festering and indeed souring the place, almost causing a type of internal decay, even as the characters, such as Mrs. Appleyard and company, are trying their very utmost to maintain a sense of outward seeming decorum inside, thanks to this mystery that is ongoing and remaining to be potentially unsolved. What will that do to the hearts and souls of the community? And what will that mean in terms of the long-lasting effects and the lingering, decaying effects that will perhaps potentially risk or causing potential harm and damage to this very close-knit community of the school and Mrs. Appleyard students and the people concerned? And what of the girls at the heart of this mystery? Miranda in particular, what is to become of them? Will they be saved? What has happened? What is going on? These and other questions are raised, and perhaps we may or may not, as the film goes, we may or may not find resolution to a lot of these questions. And in fact, we might think that we find certain resolutions, but also the film might provide us, the viewers, with some room for interpretation as to how we can digest these events that we're seeing, how we can perhaps try to put the puzzle pieces together, if at all, perhaps come up with our own possible solutions, while also entertaining in this very ethereal and oftentimes very frightening way, while also entertaining aspects of the potential supernatural and the otherworldly, sort of netherworld or otherworldly. And that goes into the way in which this film, Picnic at Hanging Rock, really is able to attach itself to a sense of time and place, an atmosphere. There's a dream, ethereal-like quality to a lot of the shots. Russell Boyd's photography is really stand out in that effect. And I think one of the ways in which that the film achieves this is the way in which it captures nature. This is Australia, and Hanging Rock is a kind of fixture, a rock structure fixture that is also perhaps a symbol or metaphor for kind of, the majesty and beauty of nature on the one hand, but also the danger and the mystery and the sense of the unknown as well. And so there are references all throughout the film with regard to the beauty and curiosity that is engendered from the beauty of nature, such as Hanging Rock. But also we are reminded of how dangerous the wilderness is, in terms of dangerous insects, ants, and the like, and also Picnic at Hanging Rock itself. Is there some kind of otherworldly presence? Is there some kind of supernatural element? Are there ghosts or spirits of the earth or the land that are somehow or another possessing or maybe inhabiting the rocks of Hanging Rock? When we look at the jagged edges, can we see perhaps maybe faces of the gods or faces of the ghosts? And if so, have they something to do with the mystery that is at the heart of what is going on and what has happened to these girls during their picnic at Hanging Rock? And that type of mystery adds another layer of the unknown. Is this a mystery that is human-made, or is this a mystery that is somehow or another outside the hands of humans? Maybe it's supernatural, maybe it's extraterrestrial, maybe it's completely inexplicable. But whatever the case is, the idea of the inexplicable is, I think, made manifest in a lot of the the feeling and drive of the film, Picnic at Hanging Rock, because as I say, when I watch the film, I'm always reminded constantly of its dream-like, almost hazy fog nature of the film, which I really admire very much. I love its sort of dream-like feel, the fantasy feel, but I'm also reminded of how the concrete nature of the urging of the people, and also by by proxy, us, the viewers as well, we are so urged on to want to try to find a solution. It's very natural when watching this film to want to seek some kind of resolution, to find the answer. What has happened? And so it's that kind of internal drive that seems to go like heads on against the sort of dreamlike ethereal nature. It's almost like reality is so eager to sort of burst forth the veneer of the dream, to try to bring everything shattering down to its sort of inexorable climax. Whether or not that will happen, you'll have to wait and see if you haven't seen the film yet. But there's this wonderful sense of tension, I think, between sort of a need to try to drive towards a solution to the mystery on the one hand, but also at the same time to maintain and preserve the hypnosis or the mystery or that feeling of the unknown that is linked on the one hand to maybe a sense of the ethereal or the eternal or heavenly, but also it's linked to the idea of the sinister and the dread and the unknown and that which might linger in the dark crevices of the rocks, or perhaps even of the mind, because that comes in a very interesting circuitous way, excuse me, to also an examination of the possibilities of the darkness that may exist also within the hearts of the characters that we are meeting. And so that also lends itself to yet even a further wrinkle of fright and deceit, and perhaps even a sense of crumbling. As I mentioned before, one of the aspects that's so great about this film is that it's about characters that are trying so desperately to maintain a sense of the external veneer. Nothing's wrong, everything is okay, but inside everything is decaying. And the more everything's decaying, the more we might become aware or cognizant of the possibility of something deep-rooted and perhaps even evil that could be lurking, even within the deep crevices of the hearts of the characters that we are meeting. So in that way, anything is possible, both triumphant and hypnotic and beautiful, as well as ugly and potentially dastardly, and yes, villainous and evil. Anything is possible in the world of Picnic and Hanging Rock, and it is for that reason, or for one of that is one of many reasons why I think it's for me one of my favorites. It's a tour de force, and it just I think it invites, and almost in a commanding way, it invites and encourages many rewatches. So I think it's wonderful that it has a wonderful, rich history with the Criterion Collection in terms of all the formats that it's been released on. It's been released on Laserdisc, and then early DVD, and then the Blu-ray DVD format, and now 4K UHD and Blu-ray format. So really, there is a long, long history with this film in Criterion. I think it's one of those great films that's I think served fairly well. I think quite well in its Criterion iterations, in that. And it's one of those films where after you finish it, or after I finish it, I'm looking for more information because I always want to know more about it. That kind of film that really draws you in and makes you ever so curious, and you can never look away. So I'm quite happy to be able to revisit this with the Criterion Collection release, and I'll speak too about the Criterion supplements, as well as maybe a comparison a little bit later with another release. This is the Second Sight Films release, which is what I have here, which was also released quite recently on the 4K release. The film is the same, but there are some notable differences between this Second Sight release and the Criterion release, which I'll try to speak a little bit about later in this video. But before we get into a discussion of the presentation, let me say, just in terms of the film, I mean, I love this film. I absolutely love this film. I mentioned the dreamlike quality of the photography. I should mention the music. I think the music is wonderful. I think it has that great combination, of the Zamfir pan flute music, which is wonderful, plus also the Bruce Smeaton score, and it has that great mix of the almost the sense of a kind of a maybe a folk tale type of tragedy element, while also giving us music which sounds almost like an Italian giallo horror film, which I think is such a great, weird, eclectic mix. I find the music to be one of the great strengths of this work. And then the performances, I should say, Anne Lambert, Miranda is in many ways the almost unattainable a myth of this work, and so is embodied by the brilliant performance by Anne Lambert. and also John Jarrett and Dominic Guard, who form this, really create a sense of this urging on of trying to solve the mystery. And we really get a sense of a kind of almost a possessive type of obsession, perhaps, with trying to solve the mystery, especially with the Michael character, the Dominic Guard character. And then with the chaos that is potentially about to confront the school, and how the people will react. If this is one of the key functions of the film. So we see the great performances by Vivian Gray and Helen Morse, and then special shout out to the great Rachel Roberts, who's this is one of the most complex performances. Is it a tragic hero performance? Is it a villain performance? Is this a performance of a character that is, are we meant to sympathize or empathize with this character? Or are we meant to be repulsed by this character? Are we meant to be scared out of our wits whenever Mrs. Appleyard approaches us from on down the corridor? I think it's everything. And I think that's one of the great aspects of Rachel Roberts here. Her presence is just so unnerving and almost out of place, which makes for even more compelling drama to come. It's one of the great performances, and it's at once both heartbreaking and utterly horrifying. What a brilliant performance that is. So yeah, across the board, this film is stunning, absolutely stunning. So if you haven't seen this film, Picnic at Hanging Rock, it's been made available over a number of versions over the many years, and here's the most latest version. So, courtesy of, at least for this one, the Criterion release. This is the 4K UHD plus Blu-ray release of this really stunning work, which is Picnic at Hanging Rock. The Criterion Collection has re-released this film, Picnic at Hanging Rock, this year on the occasion of this year 2024, courtesy of this new 4K UHD plus Blu-ray combo edition. The film is at spine number 29, so it's quite early on in the Criterion Collection spine number catalog. Again, as shown first in the early kind of old school DVD, which was really great at the time. And I should point out that the version that we have here it's what is known as the director's cut. So I understand that there was a version of the film that was released theatrically, and then which has a different running time. But this director's cut, or what's described as being the director's cut, is described as being 107 minutes. So we'll talk about another version of the film when we get to the second sight release, by the way. But this is what's referred to as the director's cut version. Look, before well, actually, I should say that I really enjoy the director's cut, although there are some interesting aspects of the other version that make for, I think, really compelling viewing. But I'll try to speak a little bit about that later when I get to some other points about, say, the second sight release comparisons. But returning to the Criterion Collection release here, with respect to the presentation, this is purported to be based on a 4K digital restoration. It's described as being new, and when I take out the staple booklet, which is really nice, on page 27 thereof, it says about the master, and I quote, "Picnic at Hanging Rock is presented in director Peter Weir's preferred aspect ratio of 1.66 to 1 on the 4K Ultra HD disc and 1.78 to 1 on the Blu-ray. Supervised and approved by Weir and director of photography Russell Boyd, the new digital master on the 4K UHD disc was created from the 35mm original camera negative and multiple interpositives, which were scanned in 6.5K and restored in 4K. The 5.1 mix was created from the 35mm original magnetic tracks by Phil Haywood at Lab in Sydney, under the supervision of Weir. The feature is presented in HDR, high dynamic range, on the 4K UHD disc, and high definition SDR, standard dynamic range, on the Blu-ray." So, yes, this is the new 4K digital restoration. We had the high def, what was described as a high def transfer from the earlier Blu-ray, or the dual format edition days. And so, but now we have, again, excuse me, this looks to me like a new 4K digital restoration. So, okay, so how do I feel about this? So I will say up front that Personally, I prefer the look of the film prior to this new 4K digital restoration. So I prefer the way it looked on the earlier Blu-ray release. In fact, I love the way it looked on the DVD, and also in terms of the soundtrack. I'll have to mention that as well. But first, let's think about the look. Now, I don't think the new 4K digital restoration is. I don't think it's bad. I mean, I think it's quite good. It's very clean. It's very sharp, and it has so much pronouncement of color that I think is very preserves sort of kind of a fidelity to the scenes of nature in particular. There are a lot of outdoor scenes of sunlight, and so that's very important to preserve. And also too, there are scenes of darkness and shadow, but those I think are pronounced very clearly in this new 4K digital restoration presentation. So I think it works quite brilliantly and quite effectively. But if I had to, uh, if I had to be very subjective, I would say that I'm not quite used to the for lack of a better phrase, how clean the frame looks. It feels almost digital in a lot of places. Case in point, or an example, the titles. When I see the titles emerge, I see the white colored titles with this very pronounced font, and then Picnic at Hanging Rock with this sort of cursive font, which is used, for instance, here. You can see a replication of that on the earlier DVD. It's very lovely. But when I saw the 4K restoration for the first time, and my eye is not very acute. I'm very, very terrible when it comes to spotting things. But I could sense almost immediately that it felt digital. It felt like these were digital titles that were superimposed onto the screen rather than these sort of burnt on titles that I've always been used to. So it took me a little bit out of the film for a moment, to be perfectly honest. And two, I must say that I the film has a very clean look, which I think on the one hand it could be said to be benefiting the film and the look. And so I don't want to knock the 4K restoration too much. I think it has a lot of value to it. Again, it pronounces a lot of these wonderful notes of natural color, tint, etc., which I think is very apropos because this is a film about nature, in a manner of speaking, and sort of the geology and stuff. So it has a sense of fidelity to the color palette of the geology of the Australian scenery that's found in Picnic at Hanging Rock. So in that way, I think it's quite successful. But if I had to choose, I really liked the imperfections of the little freckles and the little spots of white that you might see in earlier versions of the film on Blu-ray or DVD or Laserdisc. I love the way it just has those little imperfections, those little scratches or just little spots here and there, because it reminds me, those earlier versions remind me of a kind of gauze or a kind of filter between me and the film. And I love that filter because it adds a kind of foggy or hazy effect to it, maybe almost subliminally. That is missing when I see the film pristine as it is, sharp, delineated as it is with this 4K digital restoration. Now, maybe that was a point all along. Maybe I wasn't meant to feel the gauze or the haze. And so maybe this is, it's supervised by Russell Boyd and Peter Weir. So, they know more than I do when it comes to this film, right? Obviously, but having made the film, they have more invested in the film and the look of it than I do. But just from my viewpoint as a fan of this work, I do like that sense of the haze. I like that sense. It just felt there's that little extra layer. There are moments in the 4K restoration where you do get the sense of the fog or the mist, right? Because that's embedded in the actual image itself. But I mean, I just like those imperfections. It also reminds me too that imperfections that exist also maybe subliminally remind me of how, again, what is seemingly perfect on the outside perhaps is hiding something that is imperfect on the inside. And that's true for many of a character in the film, Mrs. Appleyard, maybe the school, the Appleyard School, Appleyard College, or maybe the sense of Hanging Rock, etc. Something that is not quite right, something that's just slightly puts us on edge. And so I just like to feel that way, even with those little touches, maybe consciously or not, or maybe purposefully or not. I do like that feeling when I watch the film on, say, earlier versions, what I don't quite get in the 4K. But again, that's not a huge knock on the 4K. I think it has a lot of positive aspects in terms of the pronouncement of a lot of the contrasts and lines. But that's the image. And then the sound, I must say that I think for the most part, my ears are not acute as well, so I can't catch everything. But I did notice some moments, especially the outdoor nature moments, where I might have heard, say, a bird in the distance when I watched the film, say on the earlier Blu-ray or on the earlier DVD. I could hear scenes like when, for instance, when the girls are in Hanging Rock and they're lying on the ground, and we see animals and wild animals and crawling around them as they're sleeping, and Miranda wakes up. It's sort of early in the film. We could hear, or I could hear anyway, some animal in the distance, maybe a bird cawing or something, when I watched the earlier versions. Whereas here, with the new 4K release and the soundtrack, I could barely make out those sounds. I mean, there was a kind of a hum, a din that was prevalent because of this. It has this sort of oppressive nature that is very subliminal, and so the soundtrack is very, very good. But again, there's those little details of, say, maybe birds in the distance that I could swear I could hear more pronounced on the early versions than I can on this. And so, not that I don't hear them at all, I do hear them, but they're, maybe for lack of a better phrase, they seem to be muffled sometimes. So I had the sense that the soundtrack too has a kind of subdued, muffled quality. That is noticeably different than, say, a slightly more pronounced way that the soundtrack pops out in, say, earlier versions as I've seen them. So, which do I prefer? Again, might be that the muffled quality could be said to be apropos the dreamlike status of the film and the characters. They're in a haze that's almost hypnotized. So in a state of hypnosis, maybe things are blocked out. I mean, I can understand that from a sort of psychological film viewing level. But again, also something that's really great about hearing the calls of nature would be that, again, it reminds us too about Picnic at Hanging Rock as being a film about nature. It's about the mysteries of nature. And so to get those constant reminders on the soundtrack, I think are really quite effective. So I think maybe some people might prefer one view or the other. I'm used to the earlier ways of watching this film. So it's going to take me some time to get used to this new version. It's not bad. I think it's, as I say, quite good and quite strong in some places, but I think overall I'm still preferring the way it looked and sounded in earlier versions. But again, maybe for people who are watching this for the first time and who are seeking the 4K UHD experience of the film, this might be an opportunity for you to watch this film. But and for those who are really into this film and who know it in and out, maybe it might be an opportunity to re-examine and maybe look at it from a different angle. That's one of the things about the story Picnic at Hanging Rock. It is very important to watch it from many different perspectives because it's one of those ultimate mystery films. So maybe this might be an opportunity to watch it and maybe identify something that wasn't identifiable before. So that could be going along the lines of the way that the soundtrack sounds just a little bit different, or the way that film looks just a little bit different. Maybe those differences might also help in the long run to further examine this film. So I'm not closed off to the idea of watching this film again on the 4K. Not at all. I'm going to continue to watch it, but I will also continue to watch it alongside my earlier releases of Picnic at Hanging Rock. So it's a kind of complex feeling I have about this new release, but again, it's another opportunity to re-examine and reconsider my feelings about this work, Picnic at Hanging Rock. And so this is the 4K UHD disc and then the Blu-ray disc. And so if you have the 4K UHD disc in the player, then that gives you the opportunity to watch the film. And then, so that's the 4K UHD disc, and we've spoken just now about some aspects of the 4K digital restoration and my feelings about it. But now let me put in the Blu-ray disc, because the 4K disc will have the film, but it won't have the supplements. if you want to go to the supplements, you're going to have to go to the Blu-ray, which is what I have here. So I go down, I put the Blu-ray in, and it's the supplements menu. And it reminds me of how the menu looked when we had the earlier Blu-ray releases from some time back, and about 10 years ago, in fact. So this is really great. But the supplements, what do we have in terms of the supplements? First off, we have the David Thompson introduction. This is approximately 9 minutes, and it says, I quote, "In the following piece, recorded by the Criterion Collection in 2014, film scholar David Thompson introduces Picnic at Hanging Rock." So this is a kind of he's obviously very much an excerpt and a fan and admirer of this work. He talks about sort of the fineness and tenderness on the one hand, and terrible things on the other. There is a sense of the approach and aspect of Peter Weir in this film, Picnic at Hanging Rock. David Thompson does make a kind of a comparison note to another film by Nicholas Roeg, which is called Walkabout. So they do have similar parallels, but he also speaks about the certain maybe approach or sensibilities of Peter Weir, and the idea of capturing a dream, and the idea of the film Picnic at Hanging Rock showing us characters wandering about trying to find out what is happening, and there's a feeling of maybe a sexual repression, or perhaps, in his words, rapture, which might or may not have something to do or linkages with the mystery itself. There is a sense of kind of eroticism. There is also a sense of suppression. There's also a sense, according to David Thompson, there's also a sense of maybe discussion of bourgeois attitudes. Also, it has a Europe. He describes it as a kind of French film feeling, which is an interesting descriptive, as well as a horror film feeling. Now, I think that this film, Picnic at Hanging Rock, I think it is in it is in very significant sum a horror film. It is there are some shots that are incredibly scary in this work, so I'm glad that he made mention of that. So I think this is a good way to understand or appreciate the fact that this is a film that has so many facets and so many mysteries that do not yield their answers so easily and so readily. And so David Thompson takes this opportunity to speak about Peter Weir generally, and how Peter Weir is good at concealing mysteries. So this is a film, perhaps it could be said, about the concealment of mysteries rather than the direct explanation of them. And also the idea of the internalization of sex and violence, and aspects or concepts of, say, what is perceived to be virginal purity on the one hand, but how that might be linked to some kind of sexualized fantasy of the people who are objectifying a number of the characters, such as the objectification of Miranda in a lot of readings of the film, which I think are very, very reasonable ones to make as well. So this is, I think it's a great introduction from David Thompson. So please check that out if you can. It's approximately 9 minutes. And then we have Peter Weir. And this is, in this 2003 interview, director Peter Weir discusses the production and enduring mystery of Picnic at Hanging Rock. And this is approximately 25 minutes. And he speaks about working with Patricia Lovell, and also discovering or being introduced to the novel by Joan Lindsay, Picnic at Hanging Rock, as a kind of mystery, or perhaps is it a true crime detective story, or is it true? Is it not true? I mean, that's one of the great aspects of the legend of the novel Picnic at Hanging Rock, and also by extension the film. Is this a true story or not? I mean, so that element, I think, is very slyly discussed here, and also in other places as well. And also Peter Weir talking about adapting the novel. And meeting the author, Joan Lindsay, being quite direct in terms of asking questions of the author about the story, and also trying to lay the groundwork in the film for maybe setting forth the idea of a police procedural on the one hand, but maybe also the possibility of things might not necessarily get resolved in a way that audiences might be used to. And so trying to lay the groundwork for not letting the audience be feeling too disappointed, but in fact understanding that maybe there is another aspect to this, another way to express this mystery. Um, and then also there are hints, as he describes. There are hints, and also in the book as well. For those who've read the Joan Lindsay book, the book is quite it's quite a book, and I think it's more or less a very faithful adaptation of the film. And there's some aspects of the book that aren't translated into the film, but I think overall the core is preserved, and so it's interesting to hear Weir also talk about how to adapt the book. And also then talking about the key sort of physical attributes of, say, the geology, the hanging rock itself, the faces in the rock. He talks about sort of maybe having some kind of linkages with spirits or the earth, Aboriginal uh, 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 connections, etc. Seemingly benign appearance, but maybe hiding something that's quite vicious, very dangerous. And also speaking, and Peter Weir speaks about working with the actors who are in this film. Vivian Merchant is really wonderful, and Rachel Roberts and Helen Morse. And also casting the girls as well. Anne Lambert for the character, for the key role of Miranda. And in fact, Miranda would have been played, or could have been played by someone else other than Anne Lambert, but Anne Lambert filled in the role almost at the last minute, and it became one of the legendary aspects of this film because it's perfect casting. And then becoming, as Peter Weir describes it, Miranda is essentially the emblem of the film because it's her presence and absence that really creates the entirety of Picnic at Hanging Rock, the work. And then also working with the people on the crew. He mentions Russell Boyd and also Martin Sharp in terms of trying to get someone who's expert, who knows the book, and trying to find the right locations, etc. And then also trying to get the right music, the Zamfir music, the flute, the pipe music, the flute music, that is also very much classic. The score is just one of the best scores around. So this is, I think, a really splendid interview with Peter Weir directly. So please check this out if you can. Again, the running time is approximately, what did I say? Yes, 25 minutes. 25 minutes. And then everything begins and ends. So this documentary, produced by the Criterion Collection in 2014, features interviews with producers Hal and Jim McElroy, executive producer Patricia Lovell, cinematographer Russell Boyd, and actors Helen Morse and Anne-Louise Lambert. The interviews were conducted in 2003. So this is Everything Begins and Ends. This is approximately 30 minutes. And this is really good. It's talking about kind of the genesis of the film from the producer's standpoint, and also that's where we get sort of the emergence of Australian cinema, or the re-emergence of Australian cinema, and sort of a kind of a new wave, a lot of excitement in the air, and then also the discovery of Peter Weir's work. And Cartier Paris, and then just going into work with Picnic at Hanging Rock, and then the book being a really, really big deal at the time of its release. And Joan Lindsay, working with Joan Lindsay, the author of the book, and then also the discussion about the film as being, or the book as being, a mystery story that is a true story. That aspect too is also discussed by the producers here, and also discussing about working with Peter Weir. The director's approach to staging scenes, and then also Russell Boyd's cinematography. There's a very famous anecdote about needing to film the outdoor picnic scene where all the girls and the teachers are sort of sitting around just by the edge of the rock face, and so there's you could shoot it in one day, but in fact, there needed to be a specific short window of hours to capture the sunlight at a precise moment to make it look ideal from a cinematographic point of view, known, I think, as magic hour. And so this story about how to then rearrange the schedule in order to take advantage of this magic hour lighting is also discussed, which is really great. And then too, other about locations, the school, the Appleyard School or college, right, is the building is Martindale Hall. So it's almost like it was made for this film. It's so perfect, as the producers say. So and um, it also talking about the film as a type of timeless piece and how it was the reaction to the film as well upon its release. So it's a very good documentary, really good. I would say that it's um, well, when we get to the second site release, there's actually another documentary on this one, um, which is A Dream Within a Dream. It's called Dream Within a Dream. In fact, this documentary, Dream Within the Dream, is much longer than this Criterion Everything Begins and Ends. Although it's interestingly enough, I think they're both relying on the same interview sources, edited together in a different way, and so we get. Let me just say up front, I actually like the documentary on the second site release a little bit more than I do this documentary. Not to say that the Criterion documentary is bad, it's quite good, but I do like this second site documentary a bit more because it's longer. There are actually more anecdotes, and they go into some more detail about different versions of the film as well, and they actually go into some places that are even a bit like questionable, which I really appreciate. But if you're in the neighborhood, if you really like Picnic at Hanging Rock, and you haven't gotten the second sight version of it yet, it's good to get that. I mean, it probably if you want to get everything, I would suggest having both versions. But that's not to say this Criterion it's not bad. It's quite good because it shows the very, I think, fundamental information very well. But I just keep that in mind when you're considering which one to get. But this is, I think, a very serviceable, quite good documentary. So again, it's approximately, what did I say? Approximately 30 minutes. And then we have A Recollection, Hanging Rock 1900. This 1975 on-set documentary by Picnic at Hanging Rock executive producer Patricia Lovell features interviews with source novel author Joan Lindsay, director Peter Weir, and cast members Rachel Roberts and Dominic Gard. So there's, I think, yeah, we see Rachel Roberts speaking a little bit, talking about. I mean, this was also mentioned elsewhere about how the girls, the students, were also very scared and very resentful of Rachel Roberts as Mrs. Appleyard. So I think there was a little bit of that aura that her character has or spilled over into real life in terms of the shooting anyway, which is interesting. And then hearing also from Dominic Gard, a very important character in the film, and then Martindale Hall is mentioned as well, and how true is this a true story? Now that's a refrain that comes back over and over when you're talking about the behind the scenes of this film. And talked about links to the actual locations. And Peter Weir is also interviewed here. This is circa 1975, so mentioning about how he read the book and how he responded to the book, etc. So this is approximately 26 minutes, and so this is also very, very excellent to check out. In particular, for example, because of the interviews with people like Joan Lindsay. So please check this out if you can. And then Holmesdale. This is the sort of short film. It's 50 minutes, and this is from 1971. And it says Peter Weir's 1971 film Holmesdale inspired executive producer Patricia Lovell to approach him about directing Picnic at Hanging Rock. The film presented here is a black comedy that was shot at Weir's home in Sydney. It won the Grand Prix at the 1971 Australian Film Industry Awards. This is a real highlight, and it's a real highlight, and it's weird and quirky, and it also has this idea of sort of outdoors, maybe a setting that's it's sort of rural and isolated setting, and you have a group of people, and there's these weird aspects of what is real, what is not real, death, how death is portrayed, etc. And there's this almost cat and mouse like quality to it of what's going on, which has shades of mystery, which is not unlike Picnic at Hanging Rock. So there seems to be an interesting connectivity there, again, as well as showcasing another work by Peter Weir. So really, really lovely indeed. So that's included approximately 15 minutes. And then we have the trailer to round out the supplements. So as far as the supplements are concerned, again, I can't find anything I think everything that was included in previous Criterion Blu-ray releases of Picnic at Hanging Rock are now carried over into this 2024 release. So to my understanding, we're not getting anything new in terms of the Criterion release anyway, but it's still, I think, overall quite good. If you're interested in the supplements as far as further exploration of Picnic at Hanging Rock, I think this is a really good place to go in terms of the Criterion release. Okay, but before I go on to the next topic, I must say a few things about the supplements. Okay, so first off, let me say that I love the earlier dual format release because, as I say, the dual format release had the benefit of the book, the novel Picnic at Hanging Rock, with Penguin. It's a sort of Penguin novel that was with this release. They don't have this the book accompanying the release of Picnic at Hanging Rock anymore, so that's a real shame because I think the book it's really quite wonderful to read the book and then watch the film, or maybe vice versa. I mean, they're so closely linked. And in fact, one can say that when you read the book, there are some aspects of the mystery that are still quite hidden in the film, but are a little bit more revealed in the book. And I could also say the vice versa is true as well. So in fact, they're very complementary to each other, I think. That's how I feel about it. So having the book, I think, is a really great benefit. I do know that the book is available, of course, in other release or other publication or other editions other than the one that was included with the Criterion release. So it's not like you can't get the book. I think it's fairly readily available at booksellers, maybe at a bookseller near you. But just to have that together with the release, an earlier release, I missed that with this new 4K release. So that would have been nice to have, but oh well. But that's one thing to keep in mind. But then the other thing I do want to mention too is, as I mentioned, in the United Kingdom, Second Sight Films, which is a great label, Second Sight Films released Picnic at Hanging Rock. Now they had a limited edition box release of Picnic at Hanging Rock, which also had a book, which I wasn't, a set of essays, I think, which I wasn't able to get, but I did get the standard edition, which is still a 2-disc standard edition. 2 discs, and they are both Ultra HD discs. And what's so great about the Second Sight release is that we have the disc 1, which has the director's cut and the sort of the 4K restoration director's cut version. So the director's cut version, which is on the Criterion release, is also on disc 1 of the Second Sight release. And then it also had it also had a commentary track. Now the Criterion Collection release doesn't have a commentary track, unfortunately, but the Second Sight release does, and I watched it with the commentary track, and it's with Alexander Heller, Nicholas, and Josh Nelson. So it was really nice to have a commentary track. So Second Sight did really great job with that. I wish the Criterion Collection had released with the commentary track, but oh well. And also I mentioned too, there's the longer documentary, A Dream Within a Dream, which is on the Second Sight release, which is kind of based upon the same interview materials that were used for the 30-minute or so documentary, Everything Begins and Ends. So they actually talk about the same things, but also talk about different things as well. And I would say that for me personally, I prefer the longer, slightly more in-depth feeling of this Second Sight releases documentary, A Dream Within a Dream. So just keep that in mind as well. And then also disc 2 on this has the theatrical cut of Picnic at Hanging Rock. The Criterion release unfortunately does not have the theatrical cut, so that's a real shame. But the theatrical cut is a great thing to have. There are a lot of differences, subtle and some not so subtle, that might lead one to read the film slightly differently. There is actually, I would say for me, the theatrical cut has some parts where more is revealed, and the director's cut has stuff where things are slightly maybe rearranged differently and maybe less is revealed. Things are removed, in fact. So I don't know which to prefer, in fact. I think one of the great strengths, I mean, it's great to have the theatrical cut because there's a little bit more there. There's a little bit, some more scenes there to show possibilities of what actually happened, for instance. whereas those scenes might not be in the director's cut. But the fact that they're not there in the director's cut doesn't make the director's cut any less significant or weaker, because again, Picnic at a Hanging Rock is a film that I think benefits from more mystery. The less one knows, the stronger it is. It's that kind of thing. So there could be a good argument, I think, to be made that the director's cut, even with its sort of excised portions, might indeed enhance or maybe even strengthen one's viewing of the story Picnic at Hanging Rock. So, but I think at the end of the day, it's great to have the choice, because then you could decide which version you prefer. The theatrical cut or the director's cut, and indeed also the theatrical cut is also, I should say, purported to be based on a new 4K restoration here. So I actually had the DVD of this many years ago because I wanted to watch the theatrical cut, but now I have the 4K. But I have the same feeling about the 4K restoration of the theatrical cut. I actually prefer earlier versions. It's very pristine, maybe a bit too digitally pristine for my tastes all the time, but it doesn't make it bad. I mean, it's still quite good in a lot of places. So, but just to round out the other great supplements that are found on the second disc, we have Finding the Light, an interview with Russell Boyd, who's the director of photography, and then A Lovely Day for a Picnic with an interview with Karen Robson, and then Crashing the Boundaries, a new interview with camera operator John Seal, and then Something Beyond Explanation, Thomas Caldwell on Picnic at Hanging Rock, interview with Joan Lindsay, and A Recollection Hanging Rock 1900, outtakes, original long trailer. So we do have a couple things that overlap, the Recollection Hanging Rock 1900 supplement, but and also the source materials from Everything Begins and Ends, and then also Dream Within a Dream, the two documentaries, kind of overlap. And indeed also the Peter Weir interview seems to be also sourced from the same materials that were relied upon when making these various documentaries as well, because he's sitting in the same room. So it seems to be sourced from the same materials, although we're getting very different results supplements wise. So, which is better than the other? Which is better than the other? I would say that I love the Criterion supplements very much so. It has things like Holmesdale and the David Thompson introduction. So these are very great indeed, and you don't find those on the second sight release. That being said, the second sight release does have the benefit of I mean, among other things, it has the benefit of the two versions of the film. And as I say, it's fun to watch the different versions, to compare them and to see which one you prefer. And actually, there are some points where they're really different. So, in that way, I think it's nice to have the second sight release. This was a really good release, although I do have certain reservations about how I feel about the restorations. But that also applies across the board here. But for those who might be interested in a kind of complete experience, you are getting things in the Criterion release that you aren't getting in the second sight release, and vice versa. So just keep that in mind. So, but if you do opt for one, if you do opt, say, for the Criterion release only, I mean, it's still a very, I think, solid and reliable release, and the supplements do have so much information about the film that you won't be disappointed. If you want to know more, if you want to even explore even more things, including maybe how the film, there's some discussion too about maybe the film ending in a different way, a different ending to the film, and you get hints of that in some of the there's outtakes as well on disc 2, so you get some hints of that in the outtakes version, and also in how that outtakes are described in the documentary. You don't quite get that in the Criterion supplements as well. So if you want to have more information about that, you should get that. But again, perhaps at the end of the day, less is more, or maybe the more mystery there, the more effective the viewing is. Again, it's up to you, but just keep that in mind in case you are curious about which version to get. And before I conclude, let me just make some remarks about the wonderful booklet. This is a staple booklet, and it's wonderful, robust, and it's practically the same as the earlier Blu-ray or dual format edition, which is right here. That booklet, by the way, is this. So you can see there's actually a little bit of a size difference, very different. This is the new 2024 release, and this is the earlier Blu-ray. So actually, the earlier Blu-ray or the dual format is a little bit bigger in terms of the the paper size. So, but the number of pages is the same, and more or less the layout of the pictures is the same, which is really nice. And I do like this sort of ethereal quality that's been used in previous releases of the film by Criterion, and now carried over into this new release. By the way, art director Sarah Habibi, Eric Skillman, designer Eric Skillman, art production coordinator William Breeze, and art assistant Julie Sussman. And then I just want to say too about the essays or the writings, which we have. The two writings, which we had in the earlier releases, by the way, are now carried over again, and they're both great. The first is by Megan Abbott, What We See and What We Seem. It's a great, great essay. Really gets at the heart of a lot of matters and written with with a sort of convincing confidence, and a very well written and easy to access manner about it. So that's the Megan Abbott essay. And then the second writing, which was also from the previous release as well, Peter Weir and the Australian New Wave Cinema. This is by Merrick Haltoff. And so this is great too, because it places Peter Weir sort of in the context of Australian cinema of the 1970s. It's a very, very exciting time. And Picnic at Hanging Rock is indeed part of that exciting Australian cinema culture. And among other points as well. So, and you can get also some indication about other films in the contemporary times during this new wave of cinema of Australia, in case you're interested. So it's a great, great reference piece. So please check it out if you can. And this is therefore the booklet that is accompanying the 2-disc set, and we have the 2 discs here. I have the Blu-ray on the top and the 4K on the bottom. I suppose you could flip them and have the 4K stacked on the top here. They don't touch, so that's okay. The Blu-ray discs look a little bit more purple than the 4K disc, which is behind it, which has a slightly tan brown quality to it, but I like that. And also, I should point out that you see the picture of Mrs. Appleyard on the Blu-ray disc, and then a picture of what looks like Miranda on the 4K disc. So very interesting indeed. Yes, it looks to me to be Miranda. So and then the Blu-ray being Mrs. Appleyard in profile, and then the booklet will slide into this side of the case, and there we have Picnic at Hanging Rock, in this plastic casing. Unlike the earlier dual format release from Criterion, which had the version I have, which had the book, which is this Digipack release. So I like the Digipack release very much, but oh well. Had Criterion been able to include the book, the novel, that would have been really cool. But oh well. I'm totally fine with this plastic casing, the stacked technology. So Picnic at Hanging Rock is back in the Criterion Collection, but it's always been there. It's one of those staple films in the Criterion Collection, I would say, and for good reason. It is a stunner of a film. It is so great. And then there's some, I think, points that I raised about how I feel about the restoration, and there's some points that I raised how I feel about aspects of the supplements, etc. And there are some other great serviceable, great releases elsewhere outside of Criterion, so just check those out if you are interested. But this Criterion release is still very high quality, so certain reservations notwithstanding, it's still very high quality. So you're in good hands if you are maybe looking to watch this film for the first time, or maybe curious to see how you feel about the restoration, etc. I mean, this is, I think, a good place to go. This is the release of the film. I mean, it's a good place to go about a film that, at the end of the day, is absolutely magnificent. So this is the work, which is Picnic at Hanging Rock. All right, my dear friends, so that's it for now. And so until we meet again, please be happy and healthy and well. And please keep on watching a lot of great movies, including Picnic at Hanging Rock, including other films by Peter Weir, including other films in the Criterion Collection, and Second Sight as well. I'm a big fan of Second Sight films releases, but Second Sight films, Criterion films, other films but from other great labels, streaming, movie theaters, wherever you're able to watch movies and beyond. So I hope you continue to enjoy your cinema journeys, my dear friends, and along the way, I hope you continue to be take very good care of yourselves. Stay strong, stay safe, and cheers.